Welcome to another episode of StreamingClouds, second this week. And as always, thank you for tuning in. Kev, what's going on, right? Are we missing some guests?
We're missing guests. It's the wrong time of day, but this is going to be a technical session, right? And one of us is going to be driving it, and I'm going to be the guinea pig, right? So today we are doing a session on, like, me and Robin were discussing this. We're going back to basics, really, on trying to demystify what you need to do, right, to be an infrastructure developer, as I like to coin the term, right? We've been talking a lot about cloud native this month. We've been talking a lot about infrastructure as a code over the previous month, right? When we had guests on talking about Terraform, and we've touched on Bicep as well, especially when it comes to Azure technologies. But I was chatting to Robin. I was like, look, when I first started out on this, it was, where'd you start? And then you check other people's screens out, right? And they'd have all these extensions running in VS Code and all these tools running. And you're like, well, what does this mean, right? This looks like hieroglyphics, right? I don't know about you, Robin. That's how I felt. And then you sort of start trying to piece it together. So this episode is purely about setting up a workstation to be able to deploy infrastructure as a code, right, and having those necessary management tools to get your day-to-day tasks done.
Sounds good. Sounds good. No, I already knew it was coming, right? I've been peeking behind the scenes. I know what you been preparing, so that's looking good. Morning, Michael.
He's a super fan. Super fan. I mean, like, yeah. Really appreciate the support, Michael. I mean, a lot of folks are probably going to catch this up on the recording, and that's what it's there for, right? Because you're going to have to go start, right? When you're still trying to get your head around things. But we've done a GitHub repo as well, so folks can go off and read that. I'm going to share that on screen now.
I'll post it in the chat
post
as well.
The link in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add it in the video description as well at the end, right? So when you catch this recording and you want to take a look at the GitHub repo, the link's in the description. Right, I'm starting to feel like a YouTuber here, right?
I know, right? My kids are already telling me, like, what's going on with you? You've changed. But we love that, Michael. The more stalkers, the better. And yeah, I'm gonna say it, even though it's cheesy. Me and Robin really want to know if these are adding value. So if you do, don't forget to add us on socials, reach out, comment, tell us if we're doing a good job or a bad job, right? We love feedback, fail fast and all that. But don't forget to like and subscribe, right? And click the bell icon, right? Wherever that appears. No. Now I've got now we've got the marketing out the way, right? We'll get on with it. So,
yeah. Well, give me a round of applause at least, right? Yes. Okay, get cracking.
Well, maybe not. Right. Okay, so let me just share the screen. We're going to start off with the GitHub repo, right? Just give folks a quick. All right, can we see that?
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah, if you go to the StreamingClouds organization in GitHub, and in there, there's a public repo. It's already live for Windows Infra Workstation setup, right? And in here, we've got a README of basically everything that we're going to go through today. System requirements. I've tried to be as pragmatic with this as possible. I've tried to just include what's required instead of trying to, overstretch it and pollute it, right, with other stuff and confuse folks, right, who may be just starting out. But what we're going to be going through with this is, I hope you like my shout out to Jack Tracy, by the way, for the commits, right? He says, like, if you're doing your commits, right, name them after Rambo films. So there is a commit generator on the internet that comes up with quirky, right, commit names. So yeah, I always start off with the Rambo film. So First Blood, right, it's the first commit. But again, comments, pull requests, feedbacks, anything that you want to add to this, just get involved, right? It's a community effort. This one, we're going to be doing two of these because I'm doing the Windows side, and Robin's going to be doing the macOS side, right? So different ecosystems, but actually, as we go through this, the worlds are colliding, right? Because we're going to be talking about WSL, so Windows Subsystem for Linux, right? So we'll be talking about that Unix, that Linux ecosystem that's now, it's been in there since Windows 10, but it's getting better and better with every iteration, every version. So I'm a big fan of WSL, purely because I like, working with Linux systems as well. And as we talked about on the Cloud Native episode the other day, with Kubernetes and other modern cloud technologies, it's built on Linux. So this is a great way of stepping into that world, right? Without having to fully replace your operating system or go out and buy a, let's just say it, right, a very elite device, right, such as a Mac, right? I love Macs, but
I was thinking, right, the whole WSL discussion, and the first thing that popped up was, just get a Mac, been done with it, right? But
some folks are starting out, Robin. Okay, we want to make this as accessible to folks as possible. So there's different requirements for different people. Yeah, I love Macs just as much as anyone else. I've got no beef with Mac, but I'm just saying, right? This is another route in. Okay.
So I don't have any beef with Windows as well, right? So I've been on Windows for almost my whole life, and the last couple of years when I went really like cloud only, I switched to Mac. Before that, I was doing office automation and everything, so I had to be running the same stuff as the things I was building and supporting. So yeah. All right, enough about the whole Windows Mac thing, right? We'll do another one revolving Mac. This one's revolving Windows. Sorry, man. Go ahead.
That's okay. No, it's fine. Just want to stipulate that, right? So put stuff in here, and I'm going to go through this, but we've got we're using pretty much latest version of Windows 11, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Windows Terminal is now built into this build of, well, at least this version of Windows 11. I'm a big fan of Windows Terminal. Very powerful. I can manage my PowerShell instances. I can manage my, my WSL instances. I can do all my command line interface activities from this one console now. So it's a replacement. I believe it's a replacement for the command console, which everyone's loved and dared for God knows how many. It's got to be 40 years, right? Starting from MS-DOS, I couldn't even tell you. It's well before me and Robin were born anyway, right? So it's been around forever. But Windows Terminal is very powerful, very customizable, and we'll get into the crux of that as well and show you what we can do with that. So the reason I put, Windows 11, it's a finger beauty, especially when it comes to the latest version WSL that's integrated with it. And we'll briefly touch on the integrations of how you just move from Windows to your WSL instance with ease, right? Maybe we'll touch on that. You'll also need CPU virtualization enabled, right? So another term for this is nested virtualization. Basically, your CPU needs hyperthreading. Now, most modern computers, laptops, etc., of a certain age will have this, but you may have to go into the BIOS and enable this, right? Or do they even call it the BIOS anymore? The UEFI interface, right? Depending on your device. But most of the time, it should be switched on by default. And what this means is that you can run a virtualization platform such as Hyper-V, or what's the one by, I'm going to say Oracle. Is it VirtualBox?
VirtualBox, yeah.
Yeah, you can run utilities like that. But with WSL, you don't actually have to run Hyper-V. So when we get onto the Kubernetes conversation, which will lead on from this, when you're a Windows user, you used to have to enable Hyper-V. If you've got WSL enabled, you don't have to enable Hyper-V. Right? So it's a bit more of a lightweight. And we'll talk about, then you've got a consistent ecosystem for doing your development in as well. So we're talking about, when we were talking about you should know all the Linux stuff before you get into Kubernetes. I completely agree with that. all the networking commands, everything. You'll be able to practice all this out from the comfort of your Windows machine. And then we've got a couple of package managers, right? So we're going to use Chocolatey, which is a very big community-driven package manager. And then I even raised a few eyebrows at Robin the other day when I said, yeah, I'm going to be using Homebrew. And he was like, I thought that was just for Macs, right? And I was like, no, you can do it in WSL as well. So we're going to be installing some packages with that. And then we're going to be using APT, right? And the distro of choice is going to be Ubuntu. One, it's very community supported. It's very popular distribution. And two, there's a partnership there with Microsoft as well when it comes to Azure, right? And especially when you're, deploying Linux VMs in the cloud, right? Ubuntu and Microsoft's partnership is very close. So the skills transfer, so the stuff that you'll learn here will be able to transfer into Azure as well. I mean, you can use other distributions. I think SUSE Linux is, if you want to use RPM packages, etc., in there. And I think you can deploy Kali Linux as well, right? If you're a security pro, right? Or, you security focus, you can deploy that in WSL. But for today, we're just going to get, I think it's Ubuntu version 2204 LTS at the time of the video, this recording. We're going to get that deployed. So I've broken down the packages, right, into sections. And the reason I've done this is so that you can attack this, right, from a modularized point of view. So you'll see some duplications here and you'll be like, why? Well, once you start your actual development, there's going to be some crossing of the streams, right? So I like to call it, right, in terms of tool sets. So you're going to have stuff that's in your Windows desktop and some stuff that's going to be deployed in your WSL instance. So we've got stuff like, the Go, Notepad++, right? We've got Git. You're going to need Git, right? Full stop. You're going to be accessing Azure Do or GitHub. VS Code, which is the de facto, right? I believe the mighty VS Code, as I like to call it. I mean, that's how I started it. It's a very concise, simple, great for beginners and pros alike, right? IDE, so integrated developer environment. For getting started, right, with writing your code for infrastructure as a code, and other DevOps related, operations. PowerShell core, it's always good to have the latest version of PowerShell, and then Azure CLI as well, right, for interfacing with Azure. You're going to need these tools, and also, with Azure CLI, that's where the Bicep tooling comes into it as well, because that's how I install Bicep anyway. I do it for Azure CLI, so I've got that that complete integration there. And then we're going to move on to the Homebrew packages, right? So Homebrew is another package manager, which was initially developed for Mac, and that's why Robin was a bit like, "That's ours, man. Why is everyone else using it?" So you can find Homebrew now on Microsoft Docs pages as an installation method for Linux machines. So it's really good to see. We're going to be installing Azure CLI there again, because I do all my work from my WSL terminal instance. Terraform and Azure Terrify, right? We had Matt Gray on a few months. We went for Azure Terrify. If you're doing Terraform development, it's a great way of deploying existing resources that you've deployed in Azure into source, basically. And I'm happy to announce that it used to be a bit of a manual install. It's got a Homebrew package now. So follow the scripts, and a lot of this is going to be automated and get you up and running. And then we're going to go through the PowerShell Core 7 as well and get that installed, right, into UWSL instance, because you're going to lean on these tools, As people always ask me, and ask Robin all the time as well, which one should I use? Terraform, Bicep, what is it? And it's the same with PowerShell and Azure CLI. If you were going to make a piece of furniture, you'd use different tools to make it, right? You'd be using, different carpentry tools, right, to form and put together and construct that table. And that's exactly the same, right, from when you're deploying infrastructure in Azure as well. You're going to need these different tools. And then I've got the installation steps. I'm not going to go through these too much, but they're there for reference. Some nice screenshots to get you up and running. And then we've got the actual commands that we're going to be doing as well.
because the stuff that's in the screenshots, you've done this already, right?
Yeah, I actually ran through
okay.
this. So, because I wanted to make sure it worked before I came on.
That's the beauty of it, right? We're live for some.
Yeah, I'm sure something's going to go wrong, but that's just the way it is. But I'm sure we'll be able to mitigate it as well. So yeah, I've tried to script this out or put the commands in as much as possible. I've also included, if we go back to the top of the repo as well, in the scripts folder here, I've split it down into Chocolatey and Homebrew. So if we go into Chocolatey, if we click on Choco Install Run, try to comment these, run me first, right? So it doesn't catch folks out, kind of thing. So I may be teaching certain people to suck eggs, but I'm trying to think back to when I first started and the issues and everything else that I faced, right? Because we just want to get people up and running in the simplest terms. So we better get started. Where is my?
I love this, mate. You've put a lot of work in the repo. I'm having it open on my second screen here as well.
I'm getting confused.
Because
the screen's here.
It's nice. It's explicit. Hopefully it will get people up and running.
So, with the power of Azure, I have spun up a virtual machine, right, with Windows 11 this morning, fresh off the press, and just to make sure, that we're. Oh, bear with. So here's the version of Windows 11 I'm using. If you're not, you can download Windows Terminal from the marketplace, right? But with all versions, right, you want to be trying to stay as latest as possible for security reasons, right? So this is the latest image. That's the beauty when you deploy stuff from Azure, from the marketplace as well. You get all the latest security updates, all the latest feature updates rolled up, right? So I've done this just for ease and convenience, but it's always best practice to do that. So just bear with. Let me get all this out of the way. So the first thing we're going to do is basically get this machine, this machine set up for virtualization, right, for WSL. So we're going to go. I'm going to turn Windows features on or off, right? It should be a staple for most folks, just in case you don't know. So if you just start typing into the keyboard when you click on the start menu, turn, hopefully the best match comes up with turn Windows features on or off. This then presents this screen. Now, for the folks that are watching this that are server admins, right, Windows server admins, this should be a familiar sight, right? But if we scroll down here, what we need is virtual machine platform ticked. And then we need Windows subsystem for Linux ticked. And then we're going to click OK. Like always, we've made some fundamental changes here to the operating system configuration, so we need to reboot. So while that restarts, boom, it's gone. So I'm just going to wait a few seconds for that to come back up. Shouldn't take too long. The reason for this is we're applying sort of hypervisor technologies, right? So we've got to enable this. There's a couple of steps. There's a couple of reboots as part of this. Let me just try and connect to it again. Hasn't come back up yet. Right, here we go. Does that come back up, Robin, on the screen? I've got our... Yeah, cool. That was pretty quick. I like that. Right, okay. So now that we've enabled those two options, what we need to do is download the WSL kernel. So there's a Linux kernel which Microsoft's developed with partners to basically facilitate, the running of a Linux instance inside of Windows. So first thing we're going to do, just to make our lives easier, I was talking about Windows Terminal before. It's now built onto Windows 11, right? If you've got the appropriate version. So I'm going to pin that to taskbar because we're going to keep on coming back to this. So sort of looks familiar to the traditional command prompt, but actually we've got this drop-down menu here where we can select different shells, right, for different instances. So we've got a PowerShell one, we've got traditional command prompt, and then we've got Azure Cloud Shell, right, which is really great. So if folks are used to using the Cloud Shell that's built into the browser, right, it's similar to that. But what we're going to do here is we're just going to shut down the WSL instance because it'll be running, even though nothing's deployed at the moment, just to make sure. And then we're going to run an update, right, to get that latest version, because now we've enabled it. It needs to install dependencies to get this up and running. So it's checking for updates. This should be dead quick because we're on the Azure backbone here in the data center. I didn't feel confident doing it from my residential, especially with the internet connection I've got at the moment. It's not safe. It's not safe.
I never seen that Azure Shell one before. Right. Oh, let's talk about that one. We're waiting on something.
Okay. So what we're going to do now is right. Okay. So we've got to reboot again. Love a reboot. Shouldn't take too long.
So that Azure Cloud Shell tab or that Azure Cloud Shell instance within your Windows terminal, what does that do? Does it connect to Azure Cloud Shell within your Azure environment? Or?
You do an AZ login and you'd have the same tools that you would have in the Azure Cloud Shell within the browser. Very powerful. Great way just to be concise, get you up and running pretty quickly. Like we're going to be installing Azure CLI, right, into our instances here. But yeah, say folks, just wanted to get up and running pretty quickly, then they can just jump into that and start managing their Azure environment from there.
Awesome. So what is it doing underneath the hood? Just spinning up an Azure Cloud Shell container or something, and you're connecting to that? Or
I'm not too sure. I just think it's got the same tools and utilities that you would find. Because normally you have to like spin up a storage account, right, for it to land, don't you, in your Azure environment? Yeah, if you're going to be doing it through the portal. Whereas I think this is done more locally. So it's something I haven't really used before because I've always installed my own version of Azure CLI, right? But yeah. Right, okay. So back on. We're rebooted. Now this is when we find out if it works or not. So we're going to go to the Microsoft Store. And folks are like, what? Yes, the Microsoft Store. This place is getting better and better. And it's a unified front for deploying applications and services, right? And what we're going to do is go to search. And yes, we are going to be downloading a Linux distribution from the Microsoft Store. So we're going to go to and type in Ubuntu. Here we go. Start typing that. And we're going to be, you see there's a couple of versions there. That's how long this has been in the game, right? But we're going to be deploying 2204 LTS. So that's the long-term services. So there's extended security updates and patches for this. So supported from Canonical, who maintain and operate Ubuntu. Right. So we're going to click on Get Here. Do you want to sign in? Click on No Thanks for the time being. Then we're going to click on Install. Right. So 400 megabits a second. That's not too shabby, right?
It's pretty quick.
That's pretty quick. You may have a varied experience from at home. Cool. So this used to be command line driven to install this, but now you can do it from here, and it's got a very very classy user interface, right? You'd think you were actually deploying Ubuntu, right, from a USB or locally. So we're going to click launch now. Hopefully my virtualization tasks have worked. Let's just see. Well, that's a good sign. So, you know, Microsoft's done a lot of work, and the product team's done a lot of work to enhance that developer experience on Windows. You know, because open source technologies, you know, are leading the charge, you know, for web development. And another, you know, when we talk about Kubernetes again, you know, that's an open source technology which is donated by Google to the Linux Foundation. So having that, you know, integrated ecosystem is just going to help you with those skills for the future. All right, let me say here, we're almost done. Look at that. So you'd think you were like setting up, you know, and installing a version of Ubuntu locally. So I'm going to click English.
But it's without the GUI, right? You only have a command line interface.
Well, once you've deployed it, it's command line, right? You can now do like GUI apps. I've not done it myself, but the features are there, so you can run Linux apps that have, I think there's certain variables around this, by the way. You can run Linux apps from your WSL instance that have a GUI interface in your Windows 11 environment now. There's a lot of crossover. So when you're going through this, it's create a Unix user account, right? You know, it's got to be lowercase, you know, everything else is standard. So I'm going to leave it there. It's pulled through my Windows account that we've got deployed for this. I'm just going to set a password. Ooh, fat fingers. Click continue. Then we've got, yeah, I tend to leave this as default, right? Keep things simple. But you can change things where you're mounting from, the mount options. Again, I would leave these options enabled, right? Just for ease of use and configuration. But if you're dangerous enough to amend these options, then please feel free, right? And then we're going to click setup. See my little penguins there on the taskbar?
Mm-hmm. I still know when it was first announced, right? WSL. Everybody went crazy. They're like, "What?
Yeah,
you can just run like a Linux kernel within my Windows machine without having to switch back and forth and whatever, and I can use my Windows development tools to develop stuff within a Linux environment." So, yeah.
Very, very powerful. I mean, yeah, I remember it got announced. I think it was like 2016, I think, something like that. And it came out on Windows 10. And it's been WSL 1, WSL 2. No doubt there'll be a WSL 3, right, in the future. But, you know, they're always working to improve the integration, right, and that experience for developers and sysadmins. I mean, you can SSH from this. You can do all that cool stuff out of the box. I like the fact, right, that security is always on top of mind here. It suggested that you run the following commands, right, to update your Ubuntu to the latest version. So general sysadmin commands, yeah, sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade, right? Keep that instance hardened, etc. I'm going to click finish. And then boom, look at that. We've got a Ubuntu instance running inside of my Windows 11 machine. When worlds collide, right? Who would have thought? So if you bring up File Explorer as well, you'll notice once you've got this installed, there's a little penguin here, the little Linux penguin. If you click on that, it brings up a sort of like a network share folder of your WSL instance. If you click in there, I can actually navigate it and move files from Windows to Ubuntu pretty. So like, you know, I come in here all the time, right? If I need to drop my my Git repos that I've cloned, or you know, or I'm merging or need to navigate around here, and come in here and just, you know, ease of use. Cool. Right. So we've got that set up. We're going to come out of that now. And we're going to start off with the deploying the packages, right, within the Windows environment. So we've set up our WSL. We've got some more configuration to do later on in there, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. So if I bring up, so the next steps, you need to run as administrator. So if we right click Windows Terminal, run as administrator. We need God rights for this. So I'm going to run this from the PowerShell side of things. So the first thing we're going to do is install Chocolatey. So all the commands and scripts are on the repo, as mentioned. So we're going to run this first. And this will pull down the Chocolatey package manager and install it locally. Right. Okay. So it says you probably don't need to, close down your shell, right? Because we've set variable paths now, right, to tell our shell that we've got Chocolatey installed. But I always like to close it down, bring it back up, just to make sure that when we're running these Choco commands, that it knows Chocolatey exists, right? Because it's made changes to our user variable paths, etc. So we've got that installed. So the next step is to install the packages, right? And this is, folks across the community are using various package managers. This is just ease of use of getting your workstation up and running as quickly as possible. So what we're going to do next is install Notepad++, Git, VS Code, and PowerShell core, right? So I'm just about to paste these in. You can see here, that's exactly what we just said there. The -y means it's like an auto approve. So if you take the -y off, you have to go in and say, yes, I want to install this. I want you to proceed with this, right, to Choco. But I'm auto approving this just for convenience and the time constraints that we've got here. So we're going to paste away. Away it goes. I love this because it just saves so much time. This was a trick that I learned from the AVD Azure Virtual Desktop image building days, right? So just getting this up and running as quickly as possible.
And it will install like Notepad++ with all the default settings you normally would have. Correct. When you use like the MSI, right?
Correct. Yeah. So vanilla, straight out of the box. Including
version. The free toolbars or without the free toolbars.
I think it's just very vanilla. I mean, it's just whatever out of the box. So downloading VS Code now. So you don't actually have to go out and start searching for all these individual packages, right, and installations. You can just, that's what I love about it. You can just put a script together, and if you have to rebuild your machine, everything's hosted in the cloud anyway. You just run these scripts, get yourself up and running, right?
Back in the day, right? running around with a USB stick with all your stuff on it.
Yeah, exactly.
I moved that over to OneDrive at one point, right? So I could pull my software down from my OneDrive, and now just use a package manager, right?
We see there, look, the VS Code icon. It's appeared on the desktop. It's still on PowerShell Core now, so latest version. There we go. Beautiful. So if we go here, you can see VS Code's installed, Notepad++ is installed, Git's installed, right? Click on that. There we go. That was painless. That's what I like, right? I don't want to be caught up, right? It's a bit like how we automate our infrastructure, right? I don't want to be caught up with getting into the, the laborious task, right, of just getting my tools up and running. So this is really powerful. So we're going to close this down again. I'm going to show you why. I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to run that as administrator again. If we go in here now, we've got our latest version of PowerShell Core that we've just installed. And also, see here, we've got our Ubuntu WSL instance that I was talking about before. So let's bring that up. And this is what I was talking about. Windows Terminal's powerful. So I've got all these shells running from the one terminal. And you can do all sorts of crazy and wonderful things to customize the terminal as well, right? So if you're fans of Oh My Posh, etc., you can really make this terminal look really, very cosmetically beautiful, right? If you're working with it day in, day out. And that's what I tend to do as well. So we're going to go over to our WSL instance, right? And we're going to basically move on to the next section, right, of installing our package manager, which is Homebrew, and getting our infrastructure as a code deployment tools installed. So if I bring that in here, sudo, right, is basically for folks that aren't used to running in Linux world, is to elevate yourself. So it's super user, right, dude. So I'm just going to enter my password. Look at that. And now we're going to install curl for starters, right? So we can start pulling files off the internet, right? So we need to go out into the internet, right, to pull certain files down, to deploy certain dependencies to get Homebrew up and running. Hopefully this should be quick with the backbone that we're using. Beautiful. All right. And then we're going to install Git as well. You're wondering, well, we've just installed Git in Windows. Yes, we have installed Git in Windows. There's some configuration, right, to basically, it's got a lot better. So you used to have to do all sorts of weird and wonderful things, right, to tell Git in Windows, because you basically, you're interfacing into a Linux instance, right? So you need to tell Git in Windows to pass your credentials or clone your repos, right, into that instance, right? And we'll talk about that shortly. So we're going to install Git now as well.
Is that including the Git credential manager?
Correct, yeah. So what we've just deployed via Chocolatey includes the Git credential manager as well, right? Because that was a focused effort, wasn't it, to get everybody on that, because there was all sorts of different authentication models out there, and I think people have unified around the Git credential manager, right?
The whole thing of trying to get logged in when you had MFA enabled, right? And creating your account keys and stuff, and they will expire. And now with the Git credential manager, you can log in with an interface that supports your multi-factor authentication as well, right?
Correct. So yeah, because it's painful, right? I just remember it being very painful. So
yeah,
there's a lot of work been done there, right, to combine that all in to ensure security's there, but also ensure like people can get on with their day-to-day jobs, right? So sorry, that last command I'm just about to run here is basically, this is the command that pulls down the installation script, the shell script, right, for Homebrew. So we're going to hit return here. And Homebrew's been modified or enhanced, right, to run on Linux as well as a package manager. Now, there are other emerging package managers out there. So, and, shout out to Flatpak as well. I think they're doing great work. So you can install, if you've got an RPM-based distribution such as Red Hat or Fedora, or you're using a Debian version, such as Debian or Ubuntu, you can use Flatpak packages across those ecosystems. So I think that's one to watch out for there. I think, they're trying to do the same thing that Chocolate's done, right, on the Windows side of things. Now, I don't know what it is. Homebrew always takes a little while to download, even with the backbone that we've got. I mean, I've done this at home, and it's taken a little while. So I'm hoping this is going to be pretty quick.
Well, it's catching up now. 43%, right? At least for this step.
It's doing the Delta check at the moment. It's very thorough. So, kudos for that.
Yeah, but if you think about it, right? Homebrew was initially, somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but Homebrew was initially created for macOS, right?
Correct.
But underneath the hood, it's a Linux operating system anyway, right? So, and that basically drew me into macOS plus the fancy hardware Apple creates, right? But to circle a little bit back around the whole Windows macOS discussion, I think you can achieve the same with both OSs, right? And I do miss my ThinkPad from time to time, my Lenovo ThinkPad. So yeah, sometimes you just look at the new Dell laptops or anything. I'm like, ooh.
I've got a Dell. Yeah. I've got a Dell. I switched from HP to Dell, and I'm very impressed. Yeah, very impressed.
My name is my Carbon X1, my Lenovo. Well, cannot have it all, right?
But there's a common playing field emerging here, right? And everything starts to fall back to Unix, some sort of Unix ecosystem. So I mean, it's great that all the vendors out there are, especially like Microsoft, they've taken note of that and gone, we need that, right? I think you can even going to be able to run Android apps in Windows 11 at some point.
Probably. If you look at the current state of our industry, right? I think like 60-70%, maybe even more at this time, is running on Linux.
Yes.
Especially the cloud. It's like the operating system of the cloud. So, for anyone who's starting out, or anyone who wants to be more comfortable with cloud or want to excel in whatever they're doing, I think spending some time on some Linux skills are crucial.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with that. Folks go for the administration in Windows Server, right, or Azure. But I equally would say, you need to get those Linux skills as well. And doesn't the Linux Foundation, it's got a framework around that, right? It's got a path for that as well. Is it called like the what's it
Linux
called?
Foundation Certified System Administrator? That's like a certification, but you don't have to get certified immediately, right? You can also just start with the basics, like, okay, what's Linux? Get comfortable with commands, right? Why should I include sudo or super user commands and stuff, right? So
cool. So that's installed. There's a couple of configuration items that we need to take care of, right? It's good housekeeping. And one of them is to add, we talked about user paths and variable paths, right? In Windows, you can do that, by going to the system properties, or most applications will take care of that for you. In Linux, you got to do most of it, yourself. One from a security point of view, and that's the ethos, right, of the ecosystem as well. So what we're going to do is grab this echo command here. It's, again, Homebrew made this as very easy as possible. We're going to paste that in, hit enter, and that's added it to my profile path. And then we're also going to do it here as well for the shell environment path as well. I'm going to grab that, hit enter. And then there's an extra step, right? If you've got sudo access, and I always like to install this, is install the dependencies, because I have run into scenarios where I needed to install something via Homebrew, but I didn't have a certain dependency, and it's just easier to do it now rather than later to make sure that you've got everything that you need moving forward. So we're just going to run this now.
Are these steps included in the manual as well, or should you remind yourself of running these commands?
I've included this in the walkthrough as well, but I just wanted to point them out. Come back to the video, check it again, read it again. It's going to be different for Windows folks, right? Maybe, seeing this, like, what is all this? It's new to me. Again, you're going to have the video, the stream, and the documentation, right, to fall back on. And then we're going to click. Well, I'm going to type Y. I've also included the website links for these package managers as well for folks to go and check out for the security conscious of us. If you're going to be deploying this in a production environment, then you're going to have to get this approved, right, by your technical authorities, your design authorities, or your security authorities inside your organization. So doing your homework and preparing the facts will put these folks at ease. That's my experience anyway.
The homebrew homework, right?
Yeah, too right. So we've installed that. And now we're going to, and this is why it's going to be easy. So now we're going to install Azure CLI. We're going to install Terraform to the binary for that. And we're also going to install Azure Terraform as well. And these commands are included in the documentation. So I'm just going to grab these. I'm going to paste them in. So a bit like, the magic that Chocolatey did before, we're going to be doing the same with Homebrew. So we've got Azure CLI, we've got Terraform, we've got AZTFY, right? So we're going to paste. We're just going to, as you can see here, it's downloading the manifests. It's going to download, I think it's going to download Azure CLI first. Can you hear my famous birds in the background, Robin, by any chance?
Yeah, I wanted to say something about it, but no, let them be, man. Let them be. Nature. That's some natural ambience then, right?
Well, it's pigeons, right? Right, okay.
These are quite some steps, man, to get up and running.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It took some pain to get here, right? I've just done it a few times. So I've just tried to keep it as concise as possible for people. So yeah, there we go. The mighty Azure CLI. You can also run upgrades as well. So if a new version comes out, you can do like Homebrew, the package, right? So Homebrew, update, the package name. Go off and do an upgrade as well. The instructions are on the Homebrew website. So obviously, iterations and versions of our, tool set here. We'll be out of date by next week. All right, so you're going to keep up to date on this. I like the little like a Stein glass, right? Beer there.
Yeah, like a pint, right?
Right. Okay.
I should terrify. Boom.
I love Azure Terraform. Such a powerful tool. Right. So if I type in Terraform, look at that. Nice. Yeah, let's do the version. Yeah. What is it? Is it dash version or hyphen version?
No, without.
Yeah,
just not just.
So we do that. Look at that. You can see that it's on Linux as well. And then if we do AZTFY, look at that. Right. Boom. So now we need to install the mighty bicep as well. So, and this is a great way, right, of making sure you got Azure CLI installed. So if I do
installing Terraform and bicep, yeah.
Oh yeah. Interesting.
It really depends on what's already in use, right?
Use the right tool for the job, right? So AZ bicep install, right? So this is going to use Azure CLI, which we've just installed, to install bicep.
Oh wait, you install Azure CLI and then you use the Azure CLI to install bicep.
Yeah, I like
Interesting.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've got bicep installed now. So it's great to have those dependencies there, right? I think it's like AZ being tested here. Oh, it's not bicep. Let me just double check that.
I have no idea, man. Yeah, I messed around with it a little bit, but I prefer Terraform. AZ bicep, huh? It is the command.
Yeah, it is AZ bicep, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it needs to restart it, or...
Oh, you can do AZ bicep space list dash versions hyphen dash. What is it? Oh, it confuses me. Is it a dash or a hyphen?
Let's try list. I think it hasn't come up in the variables yet, so maybe we need to restart the instance, etc. But it is installed.
Do a reload, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, just bear with me. So what we're going to do next is we go back to... We're going to install PowerShell. So in order to install PowerShell, let me clear the screen up first. In order to install PowerShell, we need to install some prerequisite packages. So the first thing we're going to do is do an update, see if there's any updates available. Shouldn't be, because we downloaded the latest packages, but we're going to then run upgrade. It's 179, right, of updates. So there we go. Let's get this installed. And we're going to install the prerequisites, right, for getting PowerShell up and running. So we're just updating our Ubuntu instance now. Right. Let me just, so we've got that installed. So what we're going to do now is basically we've got to let our Ubuntu instance know and our package manager know, right? apt-get, right? To know where PowerShell 7 is. So first of all, we're going to enable the transport HTTPS. Get that installed. Then we're going to download the Microsoft repository GPG keys, right? So the public encryption keys, right, for Microsoft packages for Ubuntu. Add them to our, and then we're going to register them, right, inside of our Ubuntu instance. So we've added that in there. Again, then we're going to run another sudo apt-get update, because now we've told it there's other repositories or other sources to get in our packages. Great. And now we're going to install PowerShell. Sweet. So if we type in, yeah, I'm just double checking, right? So if I type in Look at that. So we've got PowerShell running inside of Linux. When worlds collide, right? So that brings us to the end of installing our packages, right? So the next step is we're just going to do some quick configs. We're going to bring up Visual Studio Code, and then we're going to go through some of the extensions, right? Very quickly. We're going to talk about how WSL works in there. So I close down my instance. And what we're going to do here is we've got our PowerShell window open. We're just going to configure our Git pretty quickly. So I've added this in because this always trips folks up, right? You've installed Git, feel great, everything seems to be working. You go to do your first commit, you push it, you get that error. I don't know who you are. What's your username, right? So you need to register this. So there's a couple of commands. So you need to basically set a username and set an email address, right? So you can attach it as metadata, right, to your Git commit. So what we're going to do here is in between the brackets, I'm just going to put Kevin Evans, right? And then I'm going to hit enter. And then we just need to set an email address as well. We'll put anything in here for now, right? But info@StreamingClouds.net, right? And then we're going to hit enter. Oh, God, that's going to save you so much pain, especially if you're an infrastructure person, right? And you're like, just get those commands in. Obviously, use an appropriate user account and email address. But yeah, it's going to save you so much pain when you actually come into committing and pushing your first piece of code. So we're going to bring this down and close that. And then we're going to bring up Visual Studio Code. And this is what we deployed, right, via Chocolatey. So obviously set your options. I mean, we could do a whole episode on VS Code, right, Robin? It's just so vast, right, and so powerful. You can make so many configuration changes. But what we're going to sort of get this is up and running with WSL. So if I go to extensions here, and obviously I've included these, right? I've included the web links to this. If I type in WSL, right at the top here, there's a Microsoft maintained extension for WSL. So if you can see here in the description, open any folder in the Windows subsystem for Linux and take advantage of Visual Studio Code's full feature set, right? We're going to click install. Right. So you're probably wondering what's happened. But if we look here in the bottom left, there's a green box and it's open a remote window, right? So we're going to click on that. And then we're going to say, I want you to reopen Visual Studio Code using WSL, right, which is our Ubuntu instance. Bring up a new window. I'm just going to close the window behind it.
And it will open the Ubuntu instance because that's the only one you have running in WSL at this point.
Correct. Right? Yeah, you can install multiple instances, but you have to set a default because obviously you don't want to confuse Windows, right? The operating system. It's like, this is the instance I'm going to use. Please use this. So as you can see here, it's connected to my Ubuntu instance inside of WSL. So if I bring up the terminal here, click new terminal, brings up a bash prompt. Again, if I type in Terraform -version, it's pulled in our tools, right? So there's a couple of other extensions as well. So the great news is the Bicep, the Terraform extension, right, for authoring, will pick up that you've got Visual Studio Code will pick up you've got a WSL backend instance and go, right, so do you want me to install those tools, those extension tools? Do you want them to be configured to use your WSL instance? And you're like, yes. So it traverses the operating system planes of Windows to the Linux instance, right? So we'll move on to that shortly. So a couple of extensions I like, right? Because there's Prettier. Am I spelling that right? This is the problem, right? Who would put a dyslexic person, right, on code? Prettier, right? Great way of jazzing up your code, introducing different colors. It's a number one for me. I absolutely love that. Right? And then, so I've just installed that there by just clicking install. And then spell checker, which is quite ironic. So there's different spell checkers for different languages, depending on where you are. We're just going to install the English one, right? Great if you're doing markdown readmes or making comments, etc. Great way of spelling that together. Then Bicep. I mean, the amount of effort and energy that goes into this extension is, I'm blown away every time they introduce something new, right? But yeah, getting that installed. So we'll click install there.
That's Jack, right? He was working on the whole Bicep ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, he's been, one of the major contributors of the Azure Landing Zone deployment in Bicep. So Jack Tracy, follow him on Twitter. Wow, he's one of the most knowledgeable guys I know, anyway. Right? And he's always open, for giving out advice. And then Terraform. Now, I was going to ask this question: which one would you use, Robin? So we've got different extensions here. We've got an Azure Terraform one, which is maintained by Microsoft, or we've got a HashiCorp one, right? Obviously, HashiCorp are the folks that develop, right, and own Terraform. But I'm really keen to understand, what the differences are. So hit us up on Twitter, right? We might put a poll out and see what's going on there. Yeah. I'd like to really understand, the differences. I did see something the other day where I think it was Pixel Robot. He was running some Terraform, and it gave him the approximate costs of how much it would run in Azure, which I thought was really powerful, right? Great for approvals, changes, getting that infrastructure deployed, right? We talk about our cloud governance. But yeah, I tend to install the HashiCorp one. Again, I'd really like to know information about the Azure Terraform one. So any information on that, just please post it up. So I'm going to click install.
So probably go for the one that's installed the most, right?
yeah. But I'm just keen to understand, right? What are the, if you're dealing with Azure all day, yeah, what are the differences? Is there a sweetener in there? Is it some sort of more, I don't know, integration point of view? Is it more Azure centric? I just want to try and understand that. So we've installed that. So if we brought up we've installed a new file here. Let me bring up I like to cheat a bit. But I go in here, StreamingClouds, right? I always like to create a local dev folder, so I'm keeping myself sane. Look at that. All the Unix and Linux guys out there, girls, are going to be like, what's he doing? He's using Windows to create a directory. Can't he just use the... I'll put local dev. Right. So if I go in here, and then I'll go back into StreamingClouds. My local dev folder. It's cheating a little bit. So... yes, I trust the author. Right. If I click new file, let's call this main.tf, right? And then if I go file main.bicep. You can see here, language services starting to come up, right? Just purely on the back of the extension name. We've installed our extensions. But so we've got those files there, but if I bring up the terminal, if I do a list, you can see there, right? In our Linux WSL instance, our files are there as well. And we've just created them in Visual Studio Code. So if I come back to here, right, bring up File Explorer, it might be a bit more familiar for folks. And if I go to, let me just refresh that. If I go to local dev, you see there that the files that we just created inside of Visual Studio Code are now inside of our WSL instance. And we can push that to GitHub, Azure Do, using the traditional routes. We can clone repos into our WSL instance, etc. And it's just a more consistent, approach to open source development, especially when it comes to infrastructure as a code tooling or using cloud native tools such as Kubernetes, etc. And that wraps up our stream. Well, it's the end of my bit anyway, Robin.
Awesome, man. I'm still thinking about, okay, what would be the differentiator or the decision to go with a WSL Ubuntu and development environment in this case versus just installing the tools on your Windows environment directly, right? Without running WSL and all that stuff.
I completely agree, right? I mean, for me, it's like you said before, learning those skills of the open source world, those Linux skills, right? That's one. Two, for me personally, it's a cleaner deployment. I know where all my tools are. It's separated. I can even back up this instance if I wanted to. So if I had to rebuild my machine, I could just drop in this WSL instance. I can actually export it. So it's like containerizing your workbench. So
yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
But again, you can just install the chocolatey packages, right? And go off and install the Terraform and Azure Terraform binaries and Bicep binaries, right? Like you would in Windows as well. So it depends, for me, as we move into that containerization, cloud native landscape, I want to be as close to the coalface as possible. So when I'm speaking to the community, to my customers, I'm speaking the same language. It's a developer experience.
Yeah, I'm thinking about use cases that would only work on Linux, but I cannot find one so fast because I haven't been really thinking about it before. As in, okay, why would I do this? Except for the user experience and the same tool set or the same environment locally as the one in the cloud, right?
Correct. I mean, we're going to be doing another video on a Kubernetes local installation, right? Local lab, and that heavily will use WSL, right? And then maybe that puts some more meat on the bones. I mean, that's what you're trying to get at, right? From a user case point of view. So, we will go through that. We will go through the dependencies required. And then once you've got your head around, right, your local cluster, how do you move that, right, to either, AKS? How do I move my, my workloads from my local machine? Because that's the beauty, right, of Kubernetes. The old saying, the developer, well, it worked on my machine. I don't know why it doesn't work in production, right? Yeah. How do we're creating that consistency there, right? And, moving it from our local development machine up to, maybe an abstracted service such as AKS, right, in Azure. So it'll be good. It'll be good to see.
Yeah, and now that we're talking about it, only the fact by itself that your runners for Azure DevOps or your GitHub Actions, or whatever CI/CD tooling you use, usually the default runner is a Linux-based
Ubuntu, right? Yeah.
Usually Ubuntu or another distro is fine as well. But I think getting yourself some exposure into the whole Linux ecosystem from a Windows perspective is really powerful, right? I think that's something you should do anyway.
Completely agree. I mean, for me, it started off with firewall and security appliances. They are all built in Linux, right?
Yep.
And then it sort of moved that way for me, right? And I agree. It's but doing it from the comfort of a desktop environment that you're accustomed to, right? That's what I like about that. The synergy there is very powerful.
Yeah, because our previous discussions revolving Kubernetes, last couple of weeks, talked a lot about fundamental skills, right? And one of them is Linux. So this will give you, generate some exposure for yourself and being able to get comfortable with it. As you already said, Kubernetes runs on Linux. Of course, you can introduce like a Windows worker node.
Windows containers.
I don't know why I want to do
that. There's a use case for everything, Robin. There's a user case for everything, right?
All right. So, but your whole control plane and everything else runs on Linux.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Love this. Everything's in the GitHub repo. We'll put it in the description. Let's see. Let's see how everybody gets along, right? And again, please reach out to us if you have any questions, any feedback. We love feedback, usually positive feedback, but of course, we're also open for things to improve. Anything else you want to wrap up with?
Thanks for everyone for watching. Hopefully this has been useful. Me and Rob are going to start churning some more of these more technical sessions out, right? So it's going to be good.
Yeah. Next one will be on me. I will practically go to the same tooling for macOS. Yeah, right. So then for completeness, I think it would be great as well. And we're working on some other sessions. You'll be seeing us, just the two of us, more in the near future.
Yeah.
So
okay.
All right. Thanks for watching.
See you later. Bye.
Catch you later. Bye.